Apple. Apple reports Q1 revenue down 5% year over year to $117.2 billion, marking its largest annual quarterly revenue decline since 2016, and net income down 13% year over year to $30 billion. Related, Kif Leswig, CNBC, Apple Q1 revenue, iPhone down 8% year over year to $65.8 billion, Mac down 29% year over year to 7.7, iPad up 30% year over year to 9.4, and wearables, home, and accessories down 8% to 13.5. Also related, Aaron Tilley, Wall Street Journal, Tim Cook says iPhone revenue would have grown without supply constraints, currency fluctuations were a challenge, and layoffs were a, quote, last resort kind of thing, unquote. Also related, Michael Potluck, 9 to 5 Mac, Apple reports Q1 services revenue up 6% year over year to $20.8 billion, and says its install base crossed 2 billion active devices, up from 1.8 billion the company reported in Q1 2022. Also related, Yifan Yu, Nikkei Asia, Apple reports Q1 revenue in Greater China fell 7.3% year over year to 23.9 billion. Revenue in Japan fell 5% to 6.8, and revenue in the rest of Asia Pacific fell 2.8% to 9.5 billion. They make a lot of money, and while Wall Street and markets in general prefer to see growth than declines, I don't know how you reasonably discount a business that has this many lines of business that are in the double-digit billions of dollars in revenue on a quarterly basis. Seems difficult to me. There's not a lot that I feel like drilling down on, with the exception of the Mac and iPad numbers, respectively. The Mac being down 30%, to me, that's, they fixed the laptops. And as a result, a bunch of pent up laptop purchases got made previously. And now all those people are well served. And so not as many laptops were sold in the past 90 days. iPad being up 30% is interesting. The iPad continues to be the most difficult category to interrogate from a financial reporting perspective, because its refresh cycle is so much longer than any of the other products. I think mostly people would agree, due to the type of job that the average iPad is hired to do, it's able to do for an exceedingly long time. And that is, it's a personal television set. It's a personal video game device, but it's a screen that people use to watch stuff, which is not to say that people aren't using iPads to make stuff. I'm making this ridiculous video with an iPad. But the fact that it's up 30% over the year previous, on the surface, would be cause for a lot of speculation, but I don't think you can reasonably do that without looking back, let's say, 36 months and seeing where the iPad rises and falls. I continue to be an iPad bull. I continue to believe that it is the form factor that most people would be better off using than a laptop, and that some people would even be better off using than a telephone. But there's plenty of other opportunity for that rant. So, Wall Street Journal documents offer a look at the 4 men, including a former child actor, who control around 86% of Tether Holdings, incorporated in 2014, and their ties to Bitfinex. I was, on first read, kind of hoping that the answer to who the former child star is would be Kurt Russell. But then I realized Kurt Russell is still working, so it would be wrong to describe him as a former child actor, even though technically he's no longer a child and he acted as a child. So you could describe him as a former child actor. It's almost certainly not Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell knows how to make a living. Aside from that, yeah, crypto malarkey. Davey Alba, Bloomberg. Sundar Pichai says Google will make LLMs like LaMDA available, quote, in the coming weeks and months, unquote, and users will be able to use them, quote, as a companion to search, unquote. Also related, Thomas Maxwell, insider, YouTube Shorts has surpassed 50 billion daily views, up from 30 billion in April of 2022. YouTube began sharing ad revenue with Shorts creators starting February 1st. Also related, Alphabet. Alphabet reports Q4 revenue up 1% year over year to $76 billion. Net income down 34% year over year to 13.6. Google Cloud revenue up 32% year over year to 7.3 billion, and employees up 22% year over year to 190,234. Also related, Todd Spangler, Variety. YouTube's ad revenue dropped 7.8% year over year from 8.63 billion to 7.96 billion in Q4, below analyst estimates of 8.2. Also related, John Swartz, MarketWatch. Alphabet reports Google advertising revenue down 4% year over year from 61.2 to 59 billion, below analyst estimates of 60.4, and Google search revenue down 2% year over year to 42.6 billion. Also related, Jennifer Elias, CNBC. Alphabet reports its other bets category lost 1.63 billion in Q4, up 12% year over year from 1.45 on 226 million in revenue, up 25% year over year from 181 million. It's numbers day. Kudos to Google for moving as fast as they appear to be on exposing large language model based products or backed products. The notion that ChatGPT came on the scene within the last 30 days and Sundar is able to make a public statement that there will be Google competing products in the market within months. We'll see whether that's 2 months or 6 months, but something tells me they're going to be willing to move fast. I saw a tweet this morning. Apparently, Sergey Brin committed some code recently, which hasn't happened in a long time. So maybe the founders are ready to come out of retirement and get their hands dirty again. I used ChatGPT for the very first time last night in order to ask question that I'm sure Google could have ultimately steered me toward the correct answer, but it was a simple question. It was, what were the most popular first names of lead singers of pop music bands between 1975 and 1990? Google, it's possible they've already baked that answer into a easily consumable response, the way they do with things like, what time is the Super Bowl starting? But ChatGPT just produces a finished response. It's not able to cite its sources, which I would consider to be a problem and an opportunity for Google. But yeah, it feels exciting to think that there might be some room for competition and therefore innovation in the tell me the answer space. Tom Schoenberg, Bloomberg. Sources: U.S. prosecutors in the Department of Justice's fraud unit are investigating California-based bank Silvergate over hosting accounts tied to FTX and LaMDA research. I'm frankly surprised that I haven't seen more reporting on the sort of second order, right? The first set of adjacent businesses to FTX that are at least tainted with the suspicion of wrongdoing. But aside from that, Crypto Malarkey fuck around and find out edition. BuzzFeed News: Twitter ending its free API access could have the unfortunate side effect of effectively killing off many useful bots like at Make It a Quote, at Big Tech Alert, and more. Also related, TechCrunch: Twitter plans to discontinue free access to its API starting on February 9th, ending support for both version 1.1 and version 2, and launch a, quote, paid basic tier instead. This is a thread in the Twitter saga, which is, I don't know, sort of, it's emotional, but I don't think especially material. It's emotional because Twitter's early success, the thing that got it from 0 to 1, was that it was something developers could embrace and extend. The fact that the bird is the logo, the fact that tweets are the name, these things are, well, the fact that at symbols in front of usernames is a convention, the notion of the hashtag, these things were all created not by Twitter employees, with the sole exception of tweet as a word, but by people who were building on top of it because the utility of the thing was so appealing that they wanted to build on top of it. And so the API closing and effectively ending the ability for interesting and unexpected applications of Twitter the protocol, Twitter the service, Twitter the experience, closing those doors is sad because it's in some ways a sort of disregarding or concluding of that chapter of its existence as a thing that owes much of its popularity to people that wanted to build on top of it. Bot accounts are another good example here, right? The Big Tech Alert, a bot that will simply tell you when a Twitter account associated with some noteworthy individual in the tech industry follows some other account that they find noteworthy. Those things are interesting. It would be surprising to me if there won't be any sort of carve out in the API rules going forward that allow for that sort of thing. But APIs which allow people to use third-party clients that have no cost structure associated with them, which is to say, Twitter makes no money from you as a user when you use a third-party client, which isn't, I don't believe, universally true, or wasn't, but maybe it was. That's difficult and frustrating. But again, the business has to be solvent in order for it to continue to be a going concern. And it wasn't for a very long time. It was limping along. It has become, many people would say, less solvent under Elon's ownership, but he's at least willing to make changes and kill darlings that previous leadership weren't necessarily or weren't evidently interested in doing. An example, I was typing out a response on Twitter last night, and I went over the 280 character limit, and instead of getting sort of red, here's where we're going to chop off what you've put into the text box, I just got a banner that said the first 280 characters will appear in the timeline. And then there was another little symbol that was a circle that was slowly filling as if you were pouring fluid into a glass. We're getting close to shipping, I mean, what Tweelon promised last month was a 4,000 character tweet limit, or character limit rather. I know it like breaks people's brains in terms of what they think the service is supposed to be and what a published object within the service, what shape that's supposed to take. But tweet threads are a successful enough user behavior that I am excited to live in a world where you don't have to thread a bunch of things, but can instead encapsulate a significant amount of idea and expression into that same single object, which can then have view counts and like counts and retweet counts and all of the other sort of metrics that we use to discern the value of a tweet. One could argue that it breaks the spirit of a bird tweeting, but maybe David Attenborough can tell us all a story about a bird who can tweet for an exceedingly long time, and then it'll still make sense. Amazon reports Q4 revenue up 9% year over year to $149.2 billion. Net income down 98% year over year to $278 million. AWS revenue up 20% year over year to $21.4 billion. A number of employees down 4% year over year to 1.54 million. Also related, Annie Palmer, CNBC. Amazon reports Q4 advertising services revenue grew 19% year over year to $11.56 billion versus $11.38 billion estimated. And subscription services revenue grew 13% year over year to $9.19 billion. 98% year over year drop in income. Wow. I can't help but look at that and think that they must be spending on things that they're not reporting publicly, which It's every business's prerogative to do that, to conceal future projects. But that's just a huge change. And again, I'm not a finance dick. I can't comment intelligently on what these numbers mean, but a 98% drop year over year, even a person in a suburban garage like me, that stands out. Also stands out, they employ 1.5 million people. Wow. Don't get me wrong, as always, empathy for the individual being told that your services are no longer required and being left without a job is not a fun experience. I've been through it myself. But the idea that they laid off a large number of people when they laid off, I don't remember Amazon's exact number, but let's call it 10,000. 10,000 on 1.5 million. Not a large number of people according to the business, unfortunately. Aside from that, Sergey Gotlin, bleeping computer, a former employee of Internet of Things manufacturer Ubiquiti, pleaded guilty to stealing gigabytes of confidential data in December of 2020 and extorting the company for ransom. That's not a good look. It's unfortunate indeed. If for no other reason than Ubiquiti is most known for making networking equipment. And if the business that produces your networking equipment is exposed to bad actors, there's a non-zero chance that you are exposed to bad actors because you rely on their networking equipment. That's extremely tenuous correlation. I don't think anybody should worry. And aside from that, that dude's in trouble. Amitaj Singh, CoinDesk, as the spat between Binance and WazirX escalates, Binance invites the Indian exchange to withdraw its assets held in Binance wallets after February 3rd. Crypto Malarkey Balkanized edition, maybe it's a working title. I don't have any idea what the spat is between these two cryptocurrency businesses, but it's interesting to see that rather than resolve their disagreement in some diplomatic way, one of them just says, "Take your money, leave." Bold. Oyon Ashraf, CoinDesk. Bitcoin miner Marathon Digital sold 1,500 BTC in January amid a rallying crypto market to cover some of its expenses. Marathon still holds 11,418 BTC. I have heard mention about how in Bitcoin and in Ethereum, the majority of the assets are held by a very small number of parties. Sounds like Marathon Digital is one of those. So whether or not this particular thing is worth reading up on Marathon Digital could be interesting, trying to understand why do they hold so much Bitcoin? Are they true hodlers in the traditional sense, or is there some ulterior motive that would explain why they hold so much? selling, 10% of their stake to cover expenses. You'd like to believe that holding that much Bitcoin would enable them to go out into the market and find a lender who would offer them reasonable terms such that they would be able to cover their expenses and then pay back the lender over time. But again, I'm no finance dick. Rita Lau, TechCrunch. Apple removes decentralized social networking app Damus from China App Store 2 days after debut, per CAC's demand that it includes content, quote unquote, illegal in China. Remember how the other day the United States government, specifically the White House, issued an opinion that, among other things, described Apple and Google as gatekeeping the mobile platforms that they develop and deliver to billions of people. This is the kind of gatekeeping we should actually be bothered by, not the you can't, well, if there is a case to provide a way to allow side loading of software onto a computing machine that someone owns outright, this is it. Damus is built on top of the Nostr protocol. The Nostr protocol is a protocol which allows for any number of things to be built on top of it. And what Damus built on top of it is something that looks a hell of a lot like Twitter or any other social network you've used. Users can post, they can react, they can retweet, they can respond, they can do all of the sort of basic primitives that you're familiar with. The key is there is no central control. If you create a Nostr account, all that account is a cryptographic key pair. So when you publish, you're publishing with your public key. And by virtue of the fact that you can publish with that public key, it proves that you hold the private key that's associated with that account. It proves that you are you as far as the system is concerned. Because you can, well, let me finish the explanation of Nostr. So that's the sort of user client experience, right? The way those posts move around the network to other clients is through relay servers. Only thing relay servers can do is relay the information. They don't host the information. They may, in some cases, host the most recent version of, say, your profile, so that when some other client goes and asks, what is the profile information for this user? Those things are cached and they're easy to find in the network. But it behaves, frankly, more like BitTorrent, if you're an old like I am, than like Twitter. The more relays there are on the network, all that information, all of the posts, all of the reactions, all of the primitives from every client on the network can flow. One of the things that Damus integrates into their app is payments using the Lightning technology that's built on top of Bitcoin, which allows for transactions in BTC to move much quicker than traditional transactions. I don't know for sure. I haven't read up on Lightning well enough, but my guess is that it's effectively an L2 chain that can process a lot quicker and then reconciles with the L1 BTC chain, but I could be off on that. So 2 days after this app is available to any user on the planet with an iOS device, which means 2 days after every iOS device on the planet has the ability to, for free, create an account which enables them to transact both in information and in currency without any ability for intermediary control. This is key. The creators of the Nostr protocol don't have the ability to control any aspect of how it operates. They can't prevent the Damus devs from building Lightning invoicing capability on top of it. It's just another form of event. 2 days after that happens, the Chinese, what is it? The Cyberspace Administration of China, the CAC, says, no, that's content that's illegal in China. That's the sort of gatekeeping that should bother everybody. And, like him or not, loathe the fact that he's the sort of person who will say, like, we're not going to pay our rent on these office spaces that Twitter entered into legally binding contracts to pay for in the form of leases. Sue me if you want to. Elon is exactly the sort of character that you'd like to believe in a version of the future where Twitter gets to a world where payments can move within the network, or where it gets even further down the path such that it adopts and implements an open protocol that governments that don't like the idea that currency can move so freely or ideas can move so freely are going to come looking for a throat to choke. And I think Elon's crazy enough to fight that fight, or to simply say, we're not going to do business in your country. We'll do business everywhere else. But I think, closing thought, there's definitely a Streisand effect here, right? I am far more motivated to go download Damus and start playing in the Nostr sandbox as a result of the Chinese government saying, if you live in China, you're not allowed to use this. Like, run toward that shit.